Let's talk more about the events unfolding currently in Iran. We can welcome Scott Lucas. He's a professor of US and international politics at the Clinton Institute at University College of Dublin. Scott, thanks so much for speaking to France 24 today. Scott, I'd like to start, if you will, with this threat of Irfan Solfani, who's been detained during these protests, possibly being executed today. In terms of the Iranian regime, what does this suggest? That the pressure is mounting? This is a real deterrent now to tell protesters stop taking to the streets?
Well, I think you've summarized that having actually not even mentioned the protest for about the first 10, 11 days. So you can look at the state English language media or French language media, and it was like there were no protests. In the past week, there's been a whole shift by the Iranian regime, which is to declare, oh, we have these protests that are manipulated or even led by the US and Israel, and all these protesters are domestic terrorists. And you reinforce that idea that they're just terrorists, there's no legitimacy to their demands, not only with the threat of the executions, but as you heard, the threat by the judiciary head that you're almost going to have these railroaded show trials, these very quick public hearings to show how awful these folks are. And then you are going to back this up with using even more force on those who continue to protest. A shift in tactics that started about 6 days ago to use live ammunition, and which is accounting for, even though we have to be cautious, but it is accounting for what we can confirm is an escalating death toll in which you have thousands of protesters who have now been slain.
I mean, of course, those executions, they are one of the reasons, or one of the reasons that he's announced in any way that Donald Trump has threatened to take action. How do Iranians respond to this? Are they buoyed by this potential support from the United States? Are they reticent to take US help? I mean, difficult to put everybody in the same, line of thinking. But how do you think that this is being felt on the ground?
And again, despite the internet cutoff, there are ways to get in contact and talking to friends and talking to colleagues inside Iran. The problem with Trump is that he's so unpredictable in his statements. So he starts off by saying, oh, I'm going to have military action, I'll take them out. And then literally only hours later, he says, oh, but I'm willing to negotiate with the Iranians about their nuclear program. So you have that question of where exactly is not just Trump, but where exactly are his advisors right now and what they're thinking. But I think more importantly is that while some people in Iran are so desperate, they might welcome the military action to punish the regime. I think most Iranians realize that any US military action puts a further target on their backs and it undermines the protest. And the reason why that is, first is it will justify the regime coming at them even harder because they will claim that the protesters are just puppets of the US. But secondly, the regime's line in every serious challenge to its authority, and this goes back to the late 90s, is to declare that the demonstrators are being manipulated by the US and Israel. And if the US carries out military action, that will feed that regime narrative. They'll just simply say, look, Iranians, look, you have to support us because these protesters are part of this US plot. So I think the more sensible proposals that are being discussed, not only by the US, but by other governments, including France, are, first of all, how can you open up communications where we can break this wall of silence? And secondly, how can you support political prisoners by calling for their release? Because what the Iranian opposition really needs now is it needs organization. And a lot of those political prisoners are the people who have provided the organization in the past, not for overthrowing the regime, but at least presenting what Iranians want to the regime.
Scott, you began answering that question by evoking the kind of erratic behavior or declarations of Donald Trump. What, to your mind, is behind the US motivation in being interested in Iran? Is it purely a question of helping protesters, or is this more at play, geopolitically speaking?
There's Trump and then there's the administration, and those two things are different. I think in terms of Trump, he has a personal interest, which is, on the one hand, I'll declare myself a president of peace. And that's when he starts talking about negotiate with the Iranians. And then he'll say, I'm the big guy here. I can use military action to change everything. But he also has this interest in oil, just in the same way that part of the reason why the U.S. has moved against Venezuela is because Trump wants that oil. Trump has long expressed a desire for oil from Iraq and oil from Iran. For those people who are actually dealing with what the U.S. can do, the Pentagon, the intelligence services, the diplomats, I do think they're looking at it in terms of the region. I think they're looking at it in terms of what does this mean for the stability of the region. When you have a U.S. which has its positions in Syria, it has its positions in Iraq, you have issues regarding what is happening in Lebanon and Yemen. And I think the balance of that is, especially reinforced by statements from the Israeli leadership and from the Gulf states in the last 24 hours, is don't go in with military action because you don't know what the repercussions will be inside Iran. You don't know how much turmoil will be sparked there, and you don't know if this will spread throughout the region, with the prospects that the regime will retaliate against U.S. positions in the region, as well as retaliating against America's allies.
All right, Scott Lucas, there's so much to talk about here. I'm afraid we have run out of time, but thanks very much for sharing your thoughts this afternoon with France 24.
Thank you.